Hello and welcome to Wolverhampton, specifically Aldersley Canal junction, where the Birmingham mainline canal meets the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. Today I have an absolutely bossed-in ride planned. We're going to be using 5 canals and 1 disused rail line to make our way on a 33-mile traffic-free cycling loop around the Black Country. Our route today starts here at Aldersley, and from here we're going to head south down the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. We pass this great sign that tells us to hang a left for Birmingham or carry on down for Stourton, which is where we're heading. And we also pass this great information board which tells us that we are at the summit of this canal, its highest point, and also gives some of the history of this canal. The surface of the towpath at this point is pretty good. It's properly surfaced, if not a little bit bumpy. But my new gravel bike, making its debut on the channel today, has no problem handling this bumpy surface, but I think it is going to get a little more challenging as we carry on around this loop. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to take on this ride, to use a mountain bike, a hybrid or a gravel type bike. We soon come to the first bridge that we pass under on this canal, and this is an interesting one, and it's known as the Tunstall Water Bridge. From just looking at the bridge from underneath, it just looks like a regular footbridge. But viewed from the top, you can see that it's not only a footbridge, but it's also an aqueduct. It carries the Smestow Brook over the canal. It's quite unusual because normally small brooks like this will be used to help fill the canal. However, James Brindley, who designed this canal, wisely let the brook flow over the canal, because downstream there was over 30 mill owners that depended on the water from this brook to drive their mills. If he'd taken the water from the brook to fill the canal, he would have faced legal action from those mill owners downstream. Heading further south down the canal towards the area of Tetnall, we head under a disused rail bridge, before passing under Hordon Road as we continue down this rather pleasant section of the canal. As we approach the busy A41, the foliage around the towpath does start to encroach a little bit, but the surface is still good, although it continues to be a little bit bumpy. We're going to head under the A41, but before we get to the next bridge, we're going to take this right fork and leave the path of the canal. We're going to make our way past this house and onto what is known as the South Staffordshire Railway walk. Once we make our way onto this disused railway line, we're immediately greeted with the sight of Tetnall Station. Today this is a pleasant cafe, and if you were starting this ride from a different place on the loop, it might make for a great stop on your way round. But for me, I'm going to carry on because I've only been going a few miles. But it's great to see the platforms here in place and the disused rail line being used as this wonderful walking and cycling track. The disused line that we're using here was originally called the Wombourne branch, or also known as the Wolverhampton and Kingswinford Railway. The line ran from Wolverhampton, just north of here, where it left the Wolverhampton to Shrewsbury line. It ran down to Wombourne, Himley, and into Pensnet, before eventually joining the Birmingham to Kidderminster Railway. We're going to stay on this line for the next 7 miles as we make our way from Tetnall down to Himley. The first section of this disused line has a tarmac surface, and although there are some muddy patches, it generally makes for good riding. After a short stint of riding down this tarmac track, we cross over the Smestow Brook on a bridge which is not original to the railway. And after we've crossed that, we then cross over the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal on what is known as a Warren Truss Bridge, a type of bridge which uses steel triangles for its strength and looks like something straight out of a Meccano set. After we cross this bridge, the surface is no longer tarmac. We move on to a more dirt gravelly type surface. However, considering that the day before I filmed this we had some pretty persistent and heavy rain, the condition of the path is pretty good. I wouldn't want to bring a road bike down here, but this is certainly not challenging for my new gravel bike. We soon come across Compton Halt. This was never a big station, hence being a halt, and there was a few buildings here, but only this one platform remains today. After having a nosy at the platform, it's time to get straight out of Compton. And not just Compton, we're going to make our way out of Wolverhampton as we head further south down the line. As we head out towards Lower Penn, the surface does get a bit more challenging. But it was actually quite good fun navigating this on my gravel bike, looking for those dry patches and looking for the right line to avoid the deepest mud. And despite the heavy rain the day before, there's nothing bad enough on this section to stop us in our tracks. We pass under quite a few of these signature yellow and burgundy bridges as we make our way out of Wolverhampton. But this one at Langley Road particularly caught my eye. I of course recognise Thomas Shelby there, but can anybody tell me who the others are? There's quite a lot of artwork like this on the bridges around Lower Penn, but I think Thomas Shelby was my favourite. As we leave Lower Penn and head further south towards Wombourne, we head out into open countryside. The surface of the track here gets a little better than it was in Lower Penn. The mud has gone, being replaced by this gravel surface. This section of disused line is also quite a bit quieter than the section through Wolverhampton. I rode this on a Sunday morning and the weather was nice, so it was pretty busy with other bikers and dog walkers. So don't expect to be getting any KOMs as you make your way through Wolverhampton. But as we head out towards Wombourne, we can stretch our legs a little bit and get a little bit of speed up. You'll know that you've got to Wombourne because we come across Wombourne Station. This, like all stations on the line for passengers, was opened in 1925 and only remained open for 7 years, closing in 1932. The station ended up being derelict for many years, but today it's a lovely cafe. And depending on where you're starting your ride on this loop, this might also be a great place to stop for something to eat on your way round. It always amazes me how much the landscape can change in not many years. The track here was only taken up in 1965, as, although passenger service closed in 1932 due to a lack of use, freight service had continued along the line right the way up until 1965. The line served a variety of industries, including brickworks, collieries and steelworks, as it made its way through the Black Country. The majority of the line was not completed until 1925. Construction actually began in 1913, but was halted due to World War I, with the line eventually being finished in 1925. Heading through Wombourne, the line again gets quite busy with walkers and other cyclists, as we make our way through this deep cutting in the centre of the town, with roads crossing the railway at this point needing to have pretty high bridges to make it across. As we emerge on the south side of Wombourne, we head out of the cutting and under the main road, and as we pass under the main road, we need to go through what appears to be a rather large pipe to carry on down the railway. The surface does get a little bit muddy here, but there's nothing that's going to stop us making our way down to Himley and rolling on down this disused rail line. And if you want to help me keep this channel on track and keep the videos rolling in, please do subscribe to the channel. It makes a massive difference and it will cost you nothing. It's not long before we get to Himley, and this is where we're going to leave the route of the disused rail line and peel off to the right, just after we pass the car park. I'll leave a link to the GPX file for this route in the description if you need it. But we're going to head down the road here and take a right at the end to carry on towards the little village of Swindon. Now, I did mention at the start that this was a traffic-free ride, and here I am on the road, but this is literally just a mile of cycling on this quiet lane towards Swindon. Now, if you wanted to avoid this bit of road altogether, you could stay on the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal from Wolverhampton and make your way down here. If you've watched the channel before, you know that I'll never miss a chance to cycle on a disused railway, and that's why I took that section there. It also mixes up the riding a little bit and saves a few miles, as the canal as it makes its way out of Wolverhampton is quite windy, where the railway is very direct. After just 1 mile of road riding, we cross over the canal and head back again onto the towpath. After negotiating this gate, which would be extremely difficult with a highly loaded bike, or a bike with a trailer, or a trike, or anything but a usual bicycle, we're able to get back on the canal path, where the surface is lovely, almost tailor-made for my gravel bike. We're now going to follow the canal from Swindon as it twists and turns its way down to Stourton. The first 2 miles of the towpath down towards Ashwood is all gravelled like this, and it's a wonderful surface to ride on. When the gravel ends, we do get a dirt track, but this is perfectly fine to cycle on, and much better than some canal towpaths I have been on recently. It's a bit bumpy in places, but we quickly make it to the aqueduct over the River Stour. From here the canal shadows the River Stour as it makes its way down to Stourport, where it joins the River Severn, providing a link down to Bristol from the Black Country. It twists and turns as it follows the river down to Stourton, so do be careful on the blind bends of people coming the other way. The canal's chief engineer, James Brindley, started construction on the canal in 1766. It's 46 miles long and makes its way from the Trent and Mersey Canal in Staffordshire down to Stourport in Worcestershire, hence the name Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. James Brindley was well known for building contour canals. He did his best to make the canals follow the lay of the land, and followed river valleys wherever possible to reduce the need for cuttings and embankments, and this is why his canals often twist and turn as they make their way through the countryside. A few miles further on we come to Stourton Junction, where the Stourbridge Canal meets the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. We're going to take a left turn here, head over the bridge and up the Stourbridge Canal. It was great to see so many cyclists, both young and old, out enjoying the canal at this junction. This is the lowest point of our ride, not psychologically, but vertically. We're around 50 metres above sea level here, but as we make the 7-mile journey from here to Netherton Tunnel, we have a 90-metre elevation gain, so we can expect lots of locks as we make our way along the Stourbridge and Dudley Canal system. And the locks start immediately as we leave the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal and head up an initial flight of 4 locks. The towpath which heads up the side of the 4th lock has a pretty steep path up the side with these ridges on to help with grip, although they weren't much help for the bike, to be honest, more of a hindrance, so I did end up actually pushing the last bit of this. Here the towpath switches to the north side of the canal and carries on through a little bit of open countryside before we make it into Stourbridge. And the towpath along this section is really good, perfect conditions for my gravel bike. As we get to the outskirts of Stourbridge, we again cross over the River Stour on an aqueduct. We then pass the point in the canal where the Stourbridge town arm branched off and headed towards Stourbridge town centre. But we're going to carry on up the Stourbridge mainline canal, up a flight of 16 locks. These raise the canal up towards Pensnet Chase, where when the canal was built in 1779 there were plenty of collieries to provide business for the canal. The towpath up the side of these 16 locks is generally pretty gentle and well surfaced, so it makes for pleasant riding as we make our way up this ascent. After ascending lock number 13, we come to the Stourbridge Glass Museum. Glass making was a thriving industry in this area, and the canal was a useful way to transport the goods safely around the country. You can also see the Red House glass cone. This is one of a few glass making cones left in the country. A little further up this flight of locks, I pulled over on one of these little bridges to get a view down of where I just come from. Not only is it a great view looking back down the locks that we've climbed, but I also wanted to look at an interesting feature on this bridge, as there are quite a few of them on the locks as I made my way up. You can see down the middle there is a perfect gap in the middle of the bridge, and there's a good reason for having this gap in the bridge. When a horse was towing a boat up or down the locks, it was able to carry on and have the rope threaded through the bridge, rather than having to disconnect from the horse each time it passed a bridge. A very clever feature that speeded up navigation through the locks. After continuing our navigation up the locks, we do eventually come to Lock 16, and a bridge appropriately named Top Lock Bridge, which we need to pass over to carry on our journey. After crossing over Top Lock Bridge, we turn to the right to carry on along Stourbridge Canal. It does look like the main canal heads on north, but that is the Fen branch line and not the main navigation of the canal. Again, if you need any help to follow this route, I'll leave a link to the route in the description of the video. If you're enjoying this video and want to support the channel, or want to say thank you for the route, you can buy me a beer via the link in the description. And thank you very much to those that already have. This section of canal winds its way around Brierley Hill, on a well-surfaced path. We are now in quite a built-up area, and so there was a lot of people out walking and enjoying the towpath. We soon come to another flight of locks, the Delph locks, and with the pub at the bottom being called the 10th lock, it's quite easy to guess how many locks are in this flight. The towpath up the side of this flight of locks is generally pretty gentle, and as we ascend this flight of locks, we leave the Stourbridge Canal and enter the Dudley Canal. Dudley Canal takes us through Brierley Hill, with a commanding view over the Merry Hill shopping centre and Netherton in the distance. The canal here used to serve the Round Oak Steel Works, which was founded in 1857 by Lord Ward, who later became the first Earl of Dudley. During the Industrial Revolution, the majority of steel production in the world came from the Black Country and Birmingham region. This was a hive of activity. It was the thick black smoke and soot from all this industry that gives the Black Country its name. But throughout the 20th century, this heavy industry declined, and the steelworks here closed in 1982, with the loss of 1,300 jobs directly and many hundreds more indirectly. And this was the reason that the area was redeveloped with the shopping centre and the shops and offices that we know today around Brierley Hill, to regenerate the area and provide jobs for local people. We've now completed 19 of the 33 miles in this journey, so I'm going to make a stop and get something to eat before carrying on the rest of this journey. Now please don't judge me, I am going to stop at Wetherspoons, but I've got a good reason for this. Mainly, you can sit outside and order on the wrap, so I don't have to leave my bike. Moving on from the busy waterfront area, the canal quickly returns to what we've been used to, a quiet waterway that winds its way through this urban area, with the remnants of heavy industry scattered down the sides and at some points across the canal itself. When we get to the Pear Tree Lane Bridge, it's time to turn off the canal and make a little shortcut to get on Dudley Canal number 2. As you can see on the map, you could carry on up Dudley Canal and turn right to get onto Dudley Canal number 2. But it seems like an unnecessary meander to me, so I'm going to make this shortcut and cut through to make our ride a little bit shorter. There is a tiny little bit of road to negotiate and cross over before we get onto a traffic-free path which leads us back to the canal. Dudley number 2 Canal takes us towards Netherton through a fairly deep cutting and underneath the appropriately named High Road Bridge. The original route of the canal didn't actually run through this cutting, and it took a more curved route around this high ground. In 1838, a tunnel was created here to straighten up the canal, but the tunnel didn't last long and was opened up in 1858 to form the large cutting that we've just come through. But if you feel like you've missed out riding through a tunnel, fear not, because we're about to come to the mother of all canal tunnels. As we cross over the original route of the Dudley Canal, which turned right here and headed south towards Hales Owen, we are going to carry on straight towards the Netherton Tunnel. The Netherton Tunnel was one of the last bits of canal built in the Birmingham and Black Country area, and it links the areas of Netherton and Tipton, providing a link between the Birmingham mainline canal and the Dudley and Stourbridge canals. Construction finished in 1858, and it was built to relieve congestion on the nearby Dudley Tunnel, which runs a similar course. The Dudley Tunnel was built much earlier and was very narrow, only allowing traffic in one direction, meaning during busy periods boats sometimes had to wait several days to make their way through the tunnel. The Netherton Tunnel is wide enough for 2 boats to pass and had a towpath on each side, meaning traffic wasn't restricted through it. It's 2.7 kilometres long, so it's quite the experience making your way through, and I very much suggest that a set of bike lights are essential if you're going to make this journey through the tunnel. I've just put my bike lights on, so let's carry on our journey and make our way through this 2.7 kilometre or 1.7 mile tunnel. It seems okay at first with the light streaming in from the entrance to the tunnel. You can also see the pinprick where the exit is, but it quickly goes dark and I quickly realised that my bike light wasn't really good enough for this journey. I do have a much better bike light than this, but after charging it up last night I found that it wasn't working this morning for some reason, so I have this one which was nowhere near as bright. Things aren't as bad as they seem on the footage. I know this looks completely pitch black, but it was still pretty gloomy in here. My one recommendation for making this journey through the tunnel would be to make sure you have a really good light on the front of your bike. There are a number of air vents along the way which cast a little bit of light down into the tunnel. They also let water in which drips down onto the canal and makes strange echoes in the tunnel, as well as this weird circle of light on the surface of the canal. This tunnel really isn't one for the faint-hearted. The surface of the towpath is generally pretty good, but it is bumpy in places, and it's made difficult by the fact that you can't see the surface properly. So again, I would really strongly recommend that you get a good bike light to come through here. As we approach the end of the tunnel, the light begins to stream in, and it takes a minute for your eyes again to adjust to having sunlight. There's also this strange effect where the surface of the canal reflects the top of the tunnel, making it look like we're cycling through an empty tube. Eventually we burst out the end of the canal tunnel into the bright sunshine, and this really was a bit of relief at this point. It really was quite the experience cycling through that tunnel, but I'm definitely glad to be out again in the sunshine. About 100 metres after exiting the tunnel, we go under the Tiverdale Aqueduct. This carries the old Birmingham mainline canal across this new canal which goes underneath it. We're going to carry on under this aqueduct to make our way to the new Birmingham mainline canal. Unfortunately, the towpath here on the south side of this section of canal is not the best, although it's pretty solid and there's no mud, so I can't complain too much. It's just a little frustrating because I could see on the north side of the canal was a lovely towpath with a gravel surface. But it's not long before we come to the Birmingham mainline canal, the new one that is, and this forms part of National Cycle Network Route 81, so the service is pretty good all the way along its length towards Wolverhampton. From here we can follow the Birmingham mainline canal back to Aldersley Junction, Wolverhampton, where we started the ride. And because this is all part of National Cycle Network Route 81, we can be fairly confident of having a decent surface to ride on for the last 9 miles of our journey. A little further up from where we joined the Birmingham mainline canal, we pass Dudley Port Station on the right, and then pass over the top of the new Midlands Metro extension. I actually had a look at this a couple of years ago when I first filmed this route from Birmingham to Wolverhampton, so we can compare the progress that's been made. This line will run from Wednesbury down to Brierley Hill. It uses the old South Staffordshire Railway line that was used by freight traffic as late as 1993. So this is how it looks today in 2024. Let's have a look how it looked in 2022. I'm certainly no engineer, but it looks to me like the gravel track has just got a little bit wider, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. Now I hope you don't mind, but at this point my GoPro actually gave up the ghost. And when I say gave up, is what I really mean is I forgot to bring my spare battery. So I hope you don't mind if I rely on some old footage of when I filmed this route a couple of years ago. So as I make my way up the only locks on the canal between Birmingham and Wolverhampton, don't be confused that I've swapped to a mountain bike from a gravel bike. Work on the canal between Birmingham and Wolverhampton started in 1768, and the original canal was designed by James Brindley. He was famous for building contour canals. He followed the lay of the land as much as possible, so his canals were quite meandering, and his canal between Birmingham and Wolverhampton was no different. In 1824, Thomas Telford was commissioned to make a more direct route between the two cities. In 1838, Thomas Telford's new canal was ready, and it was 7 miles shorter than the original Brindley Canal. They crisscross each other at various points along the journey, and Telford's canal is known as the Birmingham New Mainline Canal, with Brindley's canal known as the Old Main Line. One of the big improvements Thomas Telford made was the Coseley Tunnel, which is 320 metres long and heads, as you've probably guessed by the name, under the Coseley area. Having just cycled through the Netherton Tunnel at 2,700 metres, this tunnel at just 327 metres long is no problem at all. The towpath is actually pretty good through here, relatively smooth, and you can see well enough with the light from either end of the tunnel, as it's not long enough to go completely dark in here. The tunnel isn't officially part of the National Cycle Network, but for me it's certainly a better route than going up and over through Coseley and coming back down to the canal. When you pop out at the other end, it's quite strange to look back at the tunnel and see the houses that appear to be just a few feet above it. As we carry on past Coseley Tunnel, the canal starts to get a little bit twistier, as Telford made less improvements the further up the line towards Wolverhampton we get. As we get closer to Wolverhampton, the skyline comes into view as we head towards the train station. From here we head under Wensfield Road and towards Wolverhampton city centre. As we make it past Wolverhampton city centre, we come into a section of the canal that was unchanged by Thomas Telford. The canal becomes noticeably narrower, and we have quite a lot of locks to make our way down as we head towards Aldersley Junction, where we started this ride. We actually have 21 locks to negotiate as we make our way the last few miles back to the start point of this ride. Some of the locks can be quite tight with quite bumpy towpaths, so do take a little bit of caution as you come down here. At Lock 12 we head under the Stour Valley Viaduct. This was built between 1849 and 1851 and it's made up of 22 arches. A little further along at lock number 15 we pass under the Stafford Road Bridge, and once we come out the other side of this bridge it feels like the canal has a little more room to breathe and there's a bit more space. After descending yet another lock we get a fantastic view of the Aldersley Viaduct. This was built between 1847 and 1849 by Robert Stevenson and William Baker, and it formed part of the line between Birmingham and Shrewsbury. This impressive looking viaduct is Grade 2 listed, and it consists of 12 arches, with the arch that crosses the canal on the skew compared to the other ones, apparently making this viaduct fairly unique. As we continue our journey along this rather pleasant section of canal, there's yet more locks to descend as we make our way to the junction with the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. There's actually 21 locks on this section of canal. They lower the canal a total of 37 metres over 2 miles, and were part of the original canal built by James Brindley in 1772. Final lock is just before the junction with the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal, and at this point we've almost made it back, doing a full loop of 33 miles around the Black Country. All that remains for us to do is cross the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal to the other side where we started this ride. So that's it, we've come full circle. A full 33-mile, almost traffic-free loop cycling around the Black Country. We've used one disused rail line and 5 different canals to make our way around this area with so much industrial heritage. It's amazing to think that in such an urban area that we've been able to find so much traffic-free cycling. I really hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, smash that like button and give the channel a subscribe. It really helps to keep it afloat. You can also support the channel further if you wish to do so by buying me a beer via the link in the description. You'll also find in the description a link to be able to download the GPX route if you want to cycle this yourself. Thank you very much for watching and happy cycling.